Hey guys, Aaron here. Today we're going to be going over the general operation, diagnosis, and replacement of the IWE on Ford trucks and SUVs. Now Ford actually came out with this system in 2005, and what it does is it uses the truck's vacuum system to lock and engage the front hub to the front CV axle. So when you're in two-wheel drive, it allows the front wheels to spin freely without turning the front differential. Now this particular truck we're working on today is a 2018 Ford F-150 King Ranch. It does have a 3.5 liter EcoBoost engine. We are experiencing a little bit of noise coming from the front passenger wheel end here. It's a very common issue with these IWEs, but before we get into all that, let's go ahead and go over the parts and tools we're going to need to get the job done. All right, so as far as tools go, we'll need an 18mm socket, a 13mm socket, a 21mm socket. We'll also need a 10 and an 8mm socket. We're going to need an 18mm open-end wrench, a large hammer or mallet, flat blade screwdriver, and a ratchet. And of course, we're going to need a new IWE assembly directly from Ford. There are a couple aftermarket companies who do make replacements. I've had a lot of luck with the Motorcraft part, so that's what I like to stick with. I'll go ahead and throw a link in the description for both the parts and the tools that I used during this video. All right, so before we go over the IWE replacement, let's go ahead and talk about what happens with these things. I took this off the truck a couple weeks ago, and it's experiencing the same exact issue as we are experiencing with the truck today, and that is the diaphragm inside has cracked, and it loses its ability to hold vacuum. So what will happen is this diaphragm will partially come in like this, and it'll start to engage the axle, and you'll have a metal on metal contact with this ring gear and the axle, and that's the noise that you hear. One good way to test this this unit here is to take a handheld vacuum pump, and you could supply vacuum to this and see if it holds vacuum. And we're going to do that a little bit later on the truck, but just doing it off the table, you can definitely see that the diaphragm is bad. One other thing that can happen to give you the same exact noise is you'll have a broken vacuum line, and it'll only be able to supply about 5, maybe 7 psi, which will partially disengage this unit and actually engage this unit to the axle, and you'll have that noise. Nothing will be wrong with the IWE itself. You'll just have a low vacuum source. So let's go ahead and go over the vacuum components of this system just to ensure that you replace the part that's truly bad. All right, so here we are on the passenger side of the engine compartment, and right here is the IWE, or the four-wheel drive solenoid. And here's a basic operation of how this system works. Anytime the vehicle is in two-wheel drive and the engine is running, we are going to be getting vacuum going to the hubs. This lower hose right here that goes into the solenoid supplies vacuum to the solenoid anytime the vehicle is running. So when we're in four-wheel drive, or you go to just select four-wheel drive on the dash, it'll actually stop giving vacuum to the IWE solenoids. So normal driving operation and conditions, you'll be having vacuum being supplied to both front IWEs. Now, a really quick way to verify that this solenoid is acting properly is to go ahead and start the motor in two-wheel drive, and we're just going to pull off this top line. This top line, like I said, goes to the IWEs. We should hear and be able to feel vacuum coming through this solenoid. Go ahead, select four-wheel drive, and you're actually going to feel that there is not going to be any more vacuum being supplied to the IWE. If you do have vacuum on this line in four-wheel drive, you can suspect that you have a bad solenoid right here. So once we verify that the solenoid is good, what we're going to go ahead and do is put a vacuum pump on this hose right here, and we're going to actually supply vacuum to this line, and we're going to make sure that vacuum holds in the entire system. If it doesn't, we can suspect we either have a bad vacuum line or a failed IWE. These IWEs, when they fail, they lose their ability to hold vacuum. All right, so let's suspect that the system doesn't hold vacuum. What we need to do is independently test each IWE to see which one's failing. Here we are on the passenger side. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna reach around the spindle, and we're gonna pull off the vacuum line from the IWE and go ahead and plug the vacuum line here. Retest the system with vacuum up at the firewall and verify that it holds. If it does hold, we can suspect that this is the IWE that was causing the system not to hold vacuum. One other quick way to test your IWE is to go ahead and jack up the truck. You don't have to take the wheel off, but I am, just because I'm going to be replacing it here in a minute. Start the vehicle in two-wheel drive and turn the rotor. And when you turn the rotor with the engine running in two-wheel drive, the rotor should be able to turn and the axle will stay stationary. If we select four-wheel drive with the engine running, the IWE will lock, and we'll go ahead and turn the rotor and the axle will turn with it. So with all that said, let's go ahead and go over what we're going to need to do to replace this IWE. First thing we need to do is take off the brake system. So we're going to be removing the brake caliper and the brake caliper mounting bracket. Next, we need to take a 21mm socket and remove the two bolts that hold the caliper mounting bracket to the spindle. Now next thing, let's just go ahead and take a wire, some coat hanger, and we're going to attach the caliper out of the way to the sway bar. Next, let's go ahead and remove the rotor. Next, let's go ahead and just remove a couple bolts that attach the brake line and ABS line to the spindle. It's going to allow us to drop the spindle out of the way a little bit without damaging anything. Okay, next we need to go ahead and remove the tie rod. To do that, we're going to be taking a 21mm socket. We're going to remove the nut. Then we're going to take a large mallet and we're going to strike the side of the spindle right here, which will allow the tie rod to come free. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove this cap using a flathead screwdriver. We're just going to put it right here. We'll take our mallet and pop it off. So once that cap's off there, let's take our 13mm socket and remove the nut that's on the axle. Okay, so next we need to take an 18mm socket and we just need to remove the nut that's on the bottom side of the sway bar end link right here. So next thing we need to do is take the upper ball joint and remove it from the spindle. To do that, let's take our 18mm socket. We're going to remove this nut. And again, with the mallet, we're going to tap the spindle and it'll come free. So sometimes you will break this loose and the ball joint will start to spin. Simply take a 5/16 or 8mm socket and make sure you hold that ball joint in place and remove it. All right, so with our axle out of our spindle, we can go ahead and replace our IWE now. There's three 8mm bolts that hold the IWE to the back side of the spindle. Let's go ahead and remove those. Before we drop the new one in, let's just clean all this grease, that's old, dirty grease that's inside of here. Now that that's clean, let's go ahead and just take some red wheel bearing grease and put a light coating on everything, the axle here and the back of the hub. Now the grease itself doesn't actually make the IWE seal and hold vacuum. The grease actually allows the IWE to slightly move and mesh with the gears a little bit better, but it really doesn't have anything to do with vacuum sealing or anything like that because it is a completely contained unit. All right, so with our new IWE in place, pretty much reverse procedure from here, starting with a single nut that's on the axle using our 13mm socket. Go ahead and reattach the sway bar to the lower control arm. Tighten it up using our 18mm socket. All right, so with our new integrated wheel end back on, we can go ahead and test it out to make sure it's fully operational. Everything's good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and start the vehicle in two-wheel drive. Should be disengaged from the axle. We can go ahead, turn the rotor, and we will see that the axle won't spin. I'm going to go ahead and put the system into four-wheel drive now, and the hub should be locked to the axle. All right, so now that we put the vehicle back together and we've tested the IWE, it is both functional in two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. This repair is complete. I hope this video helped you out. If it has, please like and subscribe. Make sure to check out the links in the description for the parts and tools I used during this video. Thanks again as always, guys. See you next time.